Have you ever felt like the world was screaming around you, while all you wanted was a single moment of silence? No one pushed you, no one hit you, but every headline, every email, every glance, every invisible pressure touched you like a dull blade carving into your spirit. In moments like that, have you ever wished you could just stand there, still in the storm, not swept away? Not protected by some fake shell, but upheld by an inner spine that bows to nothing. We live in an age where chaos no longer comes from war or famine, but from our own minds. The nameless noise, the commands to outdo, to prove, to react, to run after something no one can even define. And then we burn out. Not because we did too much, but because we couldn't stop, couldn't disconnect, couldn't control the endless stream of thoughts dragging us to the edge. In a world like this, how do you stop your mind from being occupied? Stoicism doesn't teach you how to master the world. It teaches you how not to let the world master you. Today's video is not a checklist of positive thinking to help you feel better. It is a journey straight into the core of your mind, how to train it so deeply that nothing external can shake you. No longer thrown off by chaos, no longer reacting on impulse, but owning every breath, every thought, every action. If you're ready not just to survive, but to stand unshaken in the storm, then walk with me from this moment on. 1. The brain is not fixed, but the mind must be trained. No one is born with an invincible mind, but each of us is given a gift that most never learn how to use: the ability to reshape ourselves. The brain is not fixed. It is not a block of stone carved once and for all. It is soft terrain where each experience, each habit, each thought leaves a footprint in the snow. A single step seems insignificant, but walk the same path enough times and it becomes a trail. And from that trail, we call it personality. People say, I can't change. Not because they can't, but because they don't want to step off the old path. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire, is not some academic idea reserved for laboratories. It is living proof that a single correct action repeated consistently can pave the way for a new life. But to make that real, you don't just need a brain, you need will. And will doesn't come from inspiration. It comes from discipline. The mind is the only thing you can fully control, but also the easiest to neglect. We take care of our bodies, our bank accounts, our relationships, but leave the mind running like a pilotless machine. And then we blame the world for being unfair, while we've never trained the guardian of our own thoughts. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Keep your mind worthy of itself." That's not just guidance, it's a warning. If you don't raise your mind, it will fall on its own. Training the mind is not the same as gaining knowledge. An intelligent person is not necessarily a resilient one. A resilient mind must be forged through hardship, trained in silence, bound by non-negotiable principles. This doesn't come from books. It comes from the moments you want to give up, but keep going. From the mornings you want to stay in bed, but choose to meditate. From the times you want to react, but choose silence instead. These small choices, repeated over time, shape your mind like water carving through stone. The mind does not grow stronger by reading another book. It grows stronger when you apply a simple lesson in a complex situation. And when you can walk through chaos without losing direction, you'll understand. Peace doesn't come from a quiet world, but from making your inner world unshakable. Some spend their whole lives seeking philosophy. Others live it daily without ever naming it. The Stoics never aimed to seem wiser than others. They simply chose to live with discipline, so that at the end of the day, when everything else is out of control, one thing remains untouched: their mind. And when you can keep your mind, you no longer need to control everything else. You can change. Not overnight, but every morning you begin again. Because the brain is not fixed, but the mind must be trained. And only when you truly train it will you begin to be free. 2. Finding stillness in suffering. No one escapes pain. But what separates the one who collapses from the one who stands isn't how many times they've been hurt. It's how they move forward afterward. Some pain slashes through the mind like a cold, sharp blade. Others don't bleed but drip quietly day after day, like a leaking faucet rotting the inner self without us even knowing. We don't die from a single blow, we fall apart, piece by piece from unhealed, fragile reactions. Society teaches us to be strong, but no one teaches us how to face pain. We get swept into cycles of avoidance, chasing temporary relief in work, love, social media, and forced laughter. But the more we avoid, the more pain finds places to live. It slips into the cracks of the mind where we pay the least attention and stays like an uninvited guest. Some scream when they're in pain. Others go so silent they can no longer hear their own soul. Neither is wrong, but only one can rise again, the one who chooses to face it. Finding stillness is not an instinct, it is an intentional act. It means looking directly at the pain and refusing to let it define you. It means that even as your emotions rage like crashing waves, you stay aware enough to know, I am not the wave. I am just standing in it. Epictetus once said, we cannot control events, but we can control our response. And in pain, that is the greatest test of a trained mind. You can learn to sit with pain without letting it devour you. Imagine pain as a child screaming. If you try to silence the scream, it only grows louder. But if you sit down and ask gently, what are you afraid of? You'll see that pain doesn't hate you, it only wants to be heard. That's where stillness begins, not by rejecting, not by fighting, but by mindfully walking alongside it. No one teaches us this as children. We only learn it when life begins striking the softest parts of us. And if you've faced loss, betrayal, despair, don't rush to call it tragedy. It is a brutal but necessary training to teach you how to stand alone without falling apart. Every time you walk through pain without losing yourself, you build another layer in the fortress of your inner world. People often ask, how do I get over it? But getting over doesn't mean forgetting. It means living on with a wound and still choosing resilience. A heart that's been hurt doesn't have to turn cold if it's protected by wisdom. And stillness is the bridge between emotion and that wisdom. When you can feel pain without being consumed, feel anger without losing reason, feel wounded and still choose kindness, you step into a form of strength no one can take away. Sometimes, stillness doesn't come from lofty teachings, but from a moment when you sit down, breathe, and say to yourself, I'm still here. I'm not done. And that is the beginning of becoming unshakable. In suffering, the one who keeps their mind is already free. 3. Reordering the brain through conscious action. The human mind, if left unchecked, will always return to its most familiar state. Chaos. Like an abandoned house, any place not cleaned becomes a shelter for trash, and the mind, if not guided by conscious action, will soon be filled with cluttered thoughts, automatic reactions, and negative emotional cycles that repeat so often they become identity. To escape that maze, you don't dream your way out, you act your way out. One deliberate, disciplined step at a time. We cannot change what we do not recognize. And most of the time, we live unconsciously, We wake up, follow routines, react on autopilot, and end the day like a machine pre-programmed to repeat. Not because we lack intelligence, but because we've never asked, is this action rebuilding me, or is it reinforcing my disorder? That's why conscious action is not about grand gestures. It's about small choices repeated with awareness. When you choose to make your bed in the morning, you're not just tidying up, you're sending a signal to your brain. I own this day. When you sit in silence for 5 minutes, instead of checking your phone, you teach the brain to stay grounded amid temptation. Every small action, when done with intention, is a quiet training session that rewires the brain, replacing old neural pathways of fear, procrastination, and distraction with new trails of agency and steadiness. Neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity, but the Stoics practiced it thousands of years before science had a name for it. They understood that untamed thinking is like an unbroken horse, and through daily conscious action, they forged discipline as the foundation for an unshakable mind. Epictetus didn't live in a lab, but he understood. No one progresses unless they bind themselves to a demanding path. Reordering the mind doesn't happen in laziness. Don't wait for motivation to change. Act first, motivation will follow. The brain doesn't need you to feel ready. It only needs you to begin. And that beginning, however small, becomes the lever that pulls you out of stagnation. You don't have to move fast. You only have to move in the right direction. Conscious action doesn't make you a superhero. It makes you fully human, awake, deliberate, choosing presence over autopilot, using each moment to adjust the compass within. In a world constantly pulling you away from social media to others' expectations, pausing to do something intentionally becomes an act of rebellion. Not against the world, but against the inner chaos trying to claim you. And every such act, whether writing a single journal line, walking without headphones, or speaking one honest sentence instead of pretending to be okay, is a small turn of the wheel steering you away from unconscious drift. There is no magical formula to change your life overnight. But if every action you take carries awareness, then with each passing day, you are laying brick by brick the foundation of your mind. And when the mind is in order, your life begins to align not because the world changed, but because you finally began rebuilding yourself on purpose. 4. Not every thought deserves a place in your mind. There's a truth most people don't dare to face. The majority of what runs through our minds is garbage. Not because we're weak or foolish, but because the human mind, if not cleansed daily, becomes a dumping ground for all kinds of thoughts. Leftover memories, petty fears, voices that aren't even ours. Like a house left open all day, it's no surprise when dust, insects, and uninvited guests creep into every corner. Thoughts are the same. If you don't learn to choose what stays and what must be shown the door, you'll quickly lose control of your inner world. People often confuse overthinking with deep thinking, but the difference is this. A deep thinker selects each thought like planting seeds in the soil of the mind, while an overthinker lets anything fall, weed or not. And once your mind is invaded by unnecessary thoughts, there's no room left to grow anything of value. Worse yet, you begin to believe those thoughts are you. But you are not your thoughts. You are the one observing them. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer not from the things themselves, but from our thoughts about them." When someone insults you, the pain doesn't come from their words, it comes from the story you tell yourself afterward. I was disrespected. They don't value me. I'm not good enough. None of these are truths. They're interpretations, And if you don't know how to interrupt that stream of thought, you'll be swept away like someone drowning, clinging to the very wave pulling them under. When a thought appears, you must learn to ask it, where did you come from? What do you want from me? Does it help to keep you in my mind for another hour? Just the act of questioning your thoughts is a major step toward maturity. It means you're no longer a victim of your mind. You've started to guide it not with force, but with the light of awareness. We can't stop the stream of thoughts from flowing, but we can choose not to swim with it. You don't have to react to everything you think. A negative thought doesn't mean you are a negative person. A painful memory doesn't mean you haven't changed. Imagine your mind as a quiet room. Each thought that enters must be vetted like a guest. If it carries poison, show it the door. If it brings light, let it stay and warm you. Controlling your thoughts doesn't make you cold, it makes you strong. Because when you no longer believe every whisper in your head, you're no longer dragged around by fear or wounds. You begin to choose what grows inside you and what ends at the root. That's the shift from unconscious living to intentional life. Remember, some thoughts only come to test you. Some thoughts only have power because you still fear them. But once you learn to take a step back, observe, and choose, you declare to your mind, I decide what is worthy to stay. And that simple declaration, if lived daily, becomes a rare form of freedom. 5. Mastering the speed of your reaction, slowing down to grow stronger. Most of what we regret in life doesn't come from wrong choices, it comes from rushed reactions. A glance makes us angry. A word makes us snap. A moment triggers us to say something we shouldn't. All of it happens in a split second, and that split second can destroy what we've spent months, years, even a lifetime building. We assume quick reactions signal strength or sharpness. But in the realm of the inner world, what makes you unshakable is often the ability to delay your response, to slow down at the right moment and choose from a deeper place within. When you learn not to respond immediately, not to nod or reject too quickly, not to interpret everything through your first emotional lens, you open a space. That space is where the mind breathes, where emotion settles, and where reason so often buried has a chance to speak. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." And that estimate is often the product of an instant reaction. The faster you are, the more you rely on instinct. The slower you are, the closer you get to self-mastery. Modern life pushes us to be fast, reply to messages instantly, make decisions quickly, live in constant urgency. But that pace keeps our minds in a state of constant agitation, like a string pulled too tight, ready to snap. Each time you choose to slow down, you go against the current, not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough not to be pulled. You're strong enough to stay silent when needed, wise enough to delay your words, and mature enough to know not everything known needs to be spoken, not everything seen needs a reaction. Someone once said, "The fastest to react in a room is often the one with the least power." True power lies in composure, not silence from weakness, but intentional silence like a lion observing before the strike. You don't need to speak to prove yourself. You only need to be grounded enough not to be shaken by every little bump. And that stability comes from practicing one habit: pausing before you respond. Every time you slow down, you're training your brain in a quiet but profound way. You're teaching it that not everything demands an immediate response. You're creating a gap between stimulus and action, and in that gap, you are reborn. Because you're no longer just reacting, you're choosing, and in that choice, whether to speak gently or say nothing, you are transforming into a more mature version of yourself. In a chaotic world, the slow responder is not behind. They're the ones living with depth. And that depth, nurtured through moments of calm, becomes a form of strength not easily moved. A strength that lets you remain steady, even when everything around you spins wildly. 6. Breath and inner dialogue. Forging the spiritual axis. When the world becomes too loud, the one thing left to hold on to is your breath. Not advice from others, not books filled with philosophy, but breath steady, silent, faithful, always there, even when you forget it exists. Breath doesn't judge. It doesn't demand. It only reminds you, you are still alive. And if you are alive, you still have the right to begin again right here, right now. In Stoic philosophy, breath is rarely discussed. But everything they teach, from self-observation to mastering emotion to controlling reaction, begins with awareness. And awareness cannot exist unless you return to the breath. You cannot understand your emotions unless you know how to pause, breathe slowly, and observe yourself being pulled under. You cannot hear your inner voice if you're constantly chasing noise. Breath is the bridge between body and mind, the place you can always return to so you're not swept away. Each morning, instead of rushing into the world with a mind full of calculations, try beginning with a few minutes of stillness. Nothing grand. Just sit, place your hand on your chest, and feel life moving through you. And as you inhale, send a quiet vow to yourself. Today, I will not let the world pull me too far from who I am. As you exhale, release what doesn't belong to you: expectations, judgment, anger. Each breath is a stroke of the hammer, realigning the spiritual axis bent by a chaotic life. And just a few minutes like this means you've done what few have the patience to do: turn inward. We often seek wisdom from the outside and forget that our inner voice has been whispering to us for years. But it doesn't shout. It doesn't break through notifications, deadlines, or polite office banter. It only speaks when you are quiet enough. And breath is the key to enter that space, a space with no right or wrong, no competition, only one honest question. Am I living as the person I want to be? And if the answer is not yet, you don't need shame. You only need to keep breathing, keep listening, because no awakening happens in one day. It's a series of small steps, of choosing to sit instead of chase, to listen instead of react, to live deeply instead of quickly. You cannot control the world, but you can control your breath. And if you do that each day, you begin to reset your entire inner belief system. From a mind ruled by anxiety, you shift into a mind that can stay still amid chaos. That is not a skill. It is a virtue, a quiet form of discipline, a spiritual thread that, each time you return to breath, you pull taut again, anchoring your being in a world that never stops shaking. 7. Emotional intelligence. Standing in the storm without losing direction. There are days when you wake up with a mind like a gray sky, all your emotions swirling like wind and whirlpool water. No one has offended you. No crisis has occurred. Yet inside, there is a storm: fatigue, irritation, anxiety, regret. And worst of all, you don't know why. That's when you realize peace does not come from controlling circumstances, but from your ability to recognize and lead your own emotions. That's when emotional intelligence is no longer a theory. It becomes your compass, keeping you from drifting in life's invisible undercurrents. Emotional intelligence doesn't mean never feeling anger. sadness, or pain. It means learning how not to let those emotions blind you, lead you, control your actions, or make you betray your core values. In anger, a person without emotional intelligence will scream, hurt others, and then regret it. A person with emotional intelligence doesn't suppress anger, but takes a step back, looks it in the eye, and asks, "Where is this anger coming from? What is it trying to protect in me?" That very question is what separates an awakened mind from a reactive one. Stoic philosophy doesn't speak of emotions as something to be denied. It teaches that emotions are only signals and you are the interpreter. Seneca once wrote, "An angry mind is a mind that has not yet understood itself." This means that every time you're angry, sorrowful, or panicked, instead of viewing it as weakness, see it as an invitation to observe yourself more deeply, because emotion is the root. If you only trim the leaves by forcing a smile, pretending to be fine, or avoiding the feeling, you lose the chance to heal from within. Emotional intelligence is the ability to sit still in the middle of a chaotic day and ask yourself, what am I really feeling, and what is this emotion asking to be understood? This is not weakness, it is the courage of someone who turns inward when everything else demands they run outward, and strangely, the more you observe your emotions, the less power they hold over you. The more honestly you face them, the less they sway you, because you are standing firm from within, not relying on external calm. When you've trained your emotional intelligence, you no longer need to win every argument. You no longer need the last word to prove your worth. You know that your value doesn't lie in saying more, but in your composure when you choose to remain silent. And that calmness is what makes you different. Not because you have no emotions, but because you know which emotions deserve to stay, which must be filtered, and which should be kept as part of your humanity. Some think being strong means never shedding tears. But true strength is daring to cry with awareness, daring to be angry with control, and daring to forgive with peace. It is the kind of strength that comes only when you forge your mind like a sword sharp, not to harm, but to protect your quiet light within. And in that way, when life's storms come, you don't panic. You stand firm not because the skies are clear, but because your spirit no longer sways with every gust of wind. 8. Where chaos ends is where true life begins. There are moments when you step away from the crowd, from the noise that has become the rhythm of daily life, and suddenly, in one brief silence, you realize you can no longer hear yourself. The things you do every day, the words you speak, the choices you make, none of it seems to come from you anymore. It's just a mechanical reaction to a long chain of demands and expectations. You're not living, you're just reacting, and the beginning of a real life is that moment you stop right in the middle of chaos and ask yourself, who am I when I no longer have to play any role? Chaos doesn't just come from the world outside. It begins within, where too many thoughts go unsorted. Too many conflicting expectations pile up, too many dreams not your own are placed upon you. When the mind can no longer tell what belongs to it and what has been imposed, it grows disoriented, aimless, and easily led by the loudest voices. We rush into action, achievements, and recognition as if trying to fill a void we can't even name. But the truth is, that void doesn't need to be filled. It needs to be faced. Seneca once wrote, "No one can walk the right path without knowing what they're seeking." And so it is with you. As long as you chase the chaos, you'll never know what truly matters, or which voice within is worth listening to. Only when you're brave enough to stop, to step away from that current, can you begin to separate noise from truth. Raw emotion from defensive habits, real dreams from borrowed expectations. To pause, not to surrender, but to begin again with clarity. People often fear silence because in it, there's no one left to blame, no distractions to escape into, only you laid bare. But that is also where you reclaim the power you lost, the power to choose, to think, to live as a free human being, not just another link in an endless chain of reactions. In that stillness, you may realize something you've long tried to avoid. You've lived too long trying to please the world and forgotten how to live true to yourself. Living authentically doesn't mean opposing society or withdrawing from life. It means being honest in your inner dialogue alone, without performance. When you can sit calmly amidst countless options without being pulled by pressure. When you can listen to your own voice without needing applause to confirm your worth, then chaos can no longer touch you. And life begins built on the most solid foundation, living as yourself. Not every quiet place is safe, but wherever you are calm enough to observe the chaos without blending into it, that is the true beginning of freedom. From there, you no longer live to escape, but to be present. No longer trying to prove anything, but simply holding to a truth that cannot be shaken. I am living, not being lived. And in that way, chaos is no longer where you get lost, but where you finally see the path. 9. Abundance, mindset, everything is enough. If you are steady, you lack nothing. But you've been conditioned to believe you're always lacking. A world built on comparison will never let you feel enough because it constantly holds someone else up as the standard taller, more beautiful, more talented, richer. And so you keep chasing the shadow of a life that was never yours. But here's a truth no one tells you. Everything is enough if you're steady enough not to be pulled off the axis of your own values. Abundance doesn't lie in how much you have. It lies in how little you need to live with dignity. The strongest person is not the one who owns the most, but the one who doesn't shake at what they lack. Marcus Aurelius once reminded, "True wealth is being able to live happily with little." When you're steady, you stop living in the fear of scarcity. You no longer measure your worth by how much you accumulate. You begin to understand that a peaceful soul is the greatest asset, and clarity is the rarest form of freedom. An abundant mindset doesn't come from accumulation, but from rejecting meaningless accumulation. It comes when you choose gratitude over envy, contribution over comparison, presence over anxiety about what's missing. A person who knows what truly matters won't be swayed by glittering offers. They don't need to have everything because they already are enough not to be defined by what they lack. And when you are steady, you don't just feel enough. You see others with a sense of enoughness too. No more envy, no more hunger to outdo. What remains is calm and a kind of power no one can take. You don't need to become anyone else to feel worthy. You are yourself whole, unwavering, and more than capable of walking through life without letting any thirst define your path. 10. Live as if you are being watched by yourself. Something strange happens when you begin to observe yourself as if watching someone else. Every action becomes more deliberate. Every reaction becomes less impulsive. Every thought is no longer left to drift in habit. When you live as someone watching yourself, you're no longer a victim of your own behavior. You become a witness to every choice, every mistake, and every quiet triumph. That's when awakening begins, not with a loud cry for change, but through the sharp and silent presence of awareness. Strength is not about never losing control. It is about seeing your anger rise within, yet not letting it command your hands and feet. It is about hearing the whisper of fear, yet continuing forward as if already familiar with that trembling. The person who lives as an inner observer no longer reacts by instinct. They respond with clarity. No one can lie to the gaze of someone watching from within, because that gaze is not blinded by fleeting emotions, nor is it fooled by smooth excuses. Epictetus once said, "It's not the things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them." But deeper still is this: it's not that you cannot change, it's that you're not awake enough to see what's guiding you. Self-observation is not just a skill, it's a way of life. A courage to accept that you are not yet perfect, but that you will not use that as an excuse to remain stuck. Every mistake leaves a trace. Every loss of control leaves a clue. And the one who lives as an observer collects those clues like pieces of a puzzle coming together. The honest version of themselves untouched by artificial polish. And you'll notice the quietest people are often the ones who observe the most. They don't speak much. They don't react quickly, but their gaze is piercing because they've seen themselves clearly long before they looked out at the world. A life like that one that does not run from itself, one that refuses to operate like a blind machine, is the foundation of the deepest freedom. Freedom does not come from controlling others, but from being clear-eyed enough to see yourself in every moment. And only when you live as an observer can you live without being controlled, without being manipulated, without losing yourself in a world rushing to live on your behalf. I once tried to stand strong by bracing myself, using logic to fight off the chaos, using discipline to avoid emotion, using silence like a stone wall. But the more I resisted, the more exhausted I became, because I had never truly observed myself. Only when I began to look back, not to judge, but to understand, did I realize. What wounded me most wasn't the crisis itself, but the way I rushed to react to it unconsciously. I learned something far too late. The freedom the Stoics speak of isn't the right to say or do whatever you want. It's the calm required not to react to anything unworthy. It's being able to sit in the middle of a chaotic day, silently observing the torrent of thoughts and slowly choosing to respond with reason and compassion. To me, training the mind is not about becoming numb. It's about keeping the heart warm even as the world grows cold. It's knowing when to speak and when to walk away in silence. It's about living a life unshaken by outer chaos and untouched by inner turmoil. And I believe anyone can reach that state if they dare to observe themselves every day. If you found value in today's journey, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future content. Together, we're building an inner strength step by step, breath by breath, decision by quiet decision that is never invisible. Be the one who stands in the storm without losing direction. The one who speaks little but is not easily swayed. The one who remains still in a world that needs you to react so it can feel in control. Because when you don't react, you hold the power. See you in the next video.